My Lord Chairman, Leader, Conference, could I begin by welcoming you to this parliamentary constituency of East Belfast, the constituency I operate from, known by those who love it as Ballymacarrat, a place of commerce and industry when Belfast was just some other place across a river. Ballymacarrat is interesting in that it developed without the benefit of planning legislation and planners into a place of industry, of education and of retail trade. It had a system of avenues and roads, usually running at right angles to each other, and streets in between. At the end of the street, there'd be a pub or two. There would be a shop where the person might know your name. The shops and houses were occupied, the streets were occupied in many cases by members of the same family. The Comfort Street on the Beersbridge Road had 13 properties occupied by extended members of the same family. There was a sense of community in the days before community became a different word, associated largely with funding applications. The houses were not great, but they were as good as, if not better, than what was available in any other industrial city in the United Kingdom. People knew where they came from, they knew where they belonged, and they looked after the district that they lived in. The arrival of the Troubles, the necessity to rehouse as opposed to rehome people became apparent. And to this day, the single biggest issue that comes across my desk is that of housing. Our approach to it has been piecemeal. The sale of public housing, which reduced the supply of public housing without the reinvestment of the money raised from those sales, did nothing to make the future any more bright. In the 1940s, early 1940s, Reich Marshal Göring dispatched the Luftwaffe to attack our industries, and he caught a fair number of houses, many tens of thousands. And yet, because the problem was seen as real and because the necessity was there, those houses were replaced. The efforts of planners over the last number of years has been to the detriment of our society and our people who live in certainly urban areas. If you do not get housing right, it impacts on health, on the economy and on retail. You cannot expect people without the wherewithal to turn a house into a home to behave by the normal parameters of society. The problems with which we struggle are the problems with which we have created, and the solution will be long in coming. Fundamental to this is the notion that someone applying for a social home who is from a particular district or a particular area is not considered as more worthy of being granted an allocation of housing in that area with which they have a connection. The result is that society starts to unravel, that those who create difficulties for their neighbours end up creating difficulties for everyone. The basic building block of anything that can be described as a fair, just and equitable society is the citizen, be he a homeowner, a private renter or a social tenant. It is that citizen in his home, living in peace and contentment and good neighbourliness with those around him, close by to his place, hopefully of employment, to the place where his children can be educated, so that he will develop a sense of responsibility to the district that he lives in. In too many cases, people are being given houses without the wherewithal to convert them to homes, and they subsequently become prisons. After the war, my grandfather got an A35 van and a load of sand, a cement mixer and 2 shovels, a long-tail shovel and a spade, and he became a house builder in the days when such things were possible. That business grew and survived for a period of 60 years when my 2 cousins eventually gave up just a very few months ago. It built an average of 200 houses a year, a not insubstantial amount of work. They were houses that were built to allow people to transmit themselves or move from the public rented sector to the privately rented to home ownership, because the difference in cost of properties was not as extensive then as it is now. The challenges facing us in the provision of social housing and of new and affordable housing are immense. People will say, what are the differences between you and other parties? I will tell you. I am tired of having DSD minister and official after another stand up and talk about the 30-odd thousand people who are waiting for houses. It is not 30-odd thousand people, it is 30,000 applications. Each of those applications could represent 2, 3, 4 or 5 people. The number of our citizens adversely affected by this could run to 100,000 people. And our answer? To inculcate into the programme of government a proposal to build houses at a rate that doesn't keep pace with the rate at which need is increasing. Building in a figure which may be achievable, which looks good, but a figure that itself accepts the basic failure of DSD to recognise and adequately tackle this problem. If I was asked what will we do, I will say it simply. We will build more houses more quickly and less expensively than you propose to. They will ask us, how will we do it? If you examine the costs that are now apportioned towards the provision of social housing, particularly the regulations to which housing associations are forced to build, they produce houses that could be produced 30% less expensively by the private builders. 30%. So if you can produce them 30% less expensively, you can produce 30% more if you reduce the standards or the regulations. As I said, Belfast grew into a reasonably attractive red brick city without the input of the planners. Regulation is necessary, but regulation creates red tape, and red tape creates bureaucracy, and there's nothing government loves more than bureaucracy, because that is the lifeblood of what it lives on. We are in danger of destabilising an entire generation. There are children growing up in houses that are rotten with damp. I remember Sir Reg telling me, when he was a young unionist, some few years ago, possibly, that he and a number of people went down to the lower end of the Newtonards Road, where the walls of the houses were shaped like that, with the water and damp running down them, and children being washed in their simmets in the sink. And they thought it was awful. And they went back and were castigated for bringing politics into the meeting. The truth is, there is a moral and social obligation on this party, and indeed on this society, to make sure that children grow up not in houses but in homes. In drawing my remarks to an uncharacteristic close, early close, given the fact that one or two of the previous speakers, according to my stopwatch, ran slightly over time, the leader does have to appear on television, I will say this. Special Needs Maintenance Allowance, many of you will never have heard of it. It's a mechanism by which the most vulnerable in our society are allowed to exist in communities. There is a notion that they may be tenants or they may be residents, and upon that notion the Social Development Minister has decided to remove that subvention and payment, to remove them from a place they call home and a sense of being among their friends and, in some cases, family. Very similar to what the Home Rule Bill was attempting, to remove people from a place that they were familiar with and happy with. This party will not support the current proposals for the removal of the Special Needs Maintenance Allowance, which will unnecessarily disadvantage the weakest and the most vulnerable in our society, to save what amounts to be a paltry amount of money. This party, like myself, will continue to speak out on behalf of the aspiring homeowner. It will continue to stand up for the weak, the poor and the underprivileged, who there is no allowance made for in the harshness of legislation. It will look at the housing selection scheme to ensure that people who have their roots in a district and have their hearts in a district are permitted to gain housing in the district of their birth. It will bring into being harsh measures to ensure that disruptive neighbours who torture the living daylights out of everybody around them, the wise boys who get housing benefit and sublet their properties, are rooted out and sought out so that those who deserve in this society will be those who benefit. I commend the thoughts in all of this document to your attention. I congratulate those in the Policy Department without whom its production would not have been possible. I congratulate the leader for keeping his boot on our necks until it was done. In closing, I do sincerely want to thank those in the housing associations with whom I work on a day and daily basis who bring relief to people who are in great need, but most particularly to those good workers in the Northern Ireland Housing Executive who I think are much undervalued, who are being targeted, and whose real basic skills and knowledge and interest in the issue of housing is about to be cast like flotsam on the water. This party believes that the Northern Ireland Housing Executive needs reform. We also believe that the dedication and history and skills of its workforce are far too valuable to be discarded. I thank you.